Blessings, beautiful heart, beautiful soul. Today I wanted to come on here and talk about my personal experience with New Age spirituality and the ego traps that seem to be inevitable throughout this journey. So I started my spiritual journey in 2012 when I began practicing yoga. So I went to my first yoga class, and I remember Shavasana being the most incredible experience I've ever felt in my life up to that point. So after that first class, I went to class every single day, most often twice a day for the next 5 years. So I went into asana full force, full power, practicing all the time and really immersing my entire being in this tradition, in this practice. I later went on to go to India, and I lived in India for 5 years. I did my 200 hours there, my 300 hours there, and took countless and countless amounts of classes to continue my practice. So I just want to start off by saying that I'm so deeply grateful for my journey, and I actually have gratitude for this practice because it has helped to bring me to where I am today. It has paved the road and paved the journey to my awakening, to me coming closer to my heart, my home, to God. So I do have a profound gratitude, a deep respect for it. It is really an amazing system, an ancient system that allows us to remove layers, the false layers of our being. It allows us to come deeper into ourself and to shed that which is no longer serving us. So that's the really good part of yoga, is that it allows us to cultivate this focus, this dharana, this concentration. It allows us to be in meditative states where we're able to build that mind-body connection, which is so important because especially in the West, we're so disassociated from the body and completely living in our minds. That being said, I have recently been having so much insight. So for the past little while, I would say maybe a few months now, I've done asana here and there because it still feels really good for my body. I haven't been practicing it so much at all in the last few weeks, and my practice is simply just meditating and being with myself and coming into my truth, into my divine heart space. So, with the yoga practice, yoga as it is today is considered a new age spiritual practice. And even though it is ancient and comes from so long ago, it is new age in the sense that through it being carried down for so many generations and so many years, through it being watered down, especially in the West, it has taken a life of its own, which is within the sphere, within the realm of this new age spirituality. And I definitely don't want to take away from some profound teachers whom I have my deepest respect towards and my deepest honor towards. I don't want to take away from them. I'm simply speaking from my personal experience and the insights that have come up for me. So yoga being a part of this new age spirituality, and how it is this dangerous ego trap that we can so easily fall into. The insight that I've been receiving is noticing throughout my journey how this practice has allowed me to build a false sense of self. It has allowed me to build a false sense of confidence And actually, through the practice, using the practice just to build up this sense of false power, this sense of falsehood. That's the simplest way that I can explain it, is this falsehood that I've built up throughout the practice. Because throughout the practice, you feel so good. Okay, you feel really, really good. You feel really, really confident. But it actually doesn't have a foundation in God. Even though it is a bhakti practice, it is a practice of devotion. So while I was in it, I was fully feeling that I was practicing for God. I was practicing for the divine. I was doing my sun salutations and truly honoring the sun. I was doing my moon salutation and truly honoring the moon. But somehow underneath all of that was this falsehood that I can now look back at and really witness and identify. And how this is a problem with the New Age spirituality practices is that so often this New Age spirituality gives us this false sense of confidence, this false sense of power that can actually lead us so deeply and profoundly down this path, which I've come to understand really as this false ascension matrix. So, what is this and how does it show up? Through all of these practices that make us feel so good temporarily, we are actually opening ourselves up to different kinds of energies. And these energies may not always be connected to the purity of God, to the purity that we can only find within our heart. And another reason why all of this for me is connected with the false ascension matrix is through my experience with the chakras as well. So, really working with the chakras for so long, the 7 chakras that are within the physical human body that I've come to understand as the physical human slave body. And once I've dissolved them, I've really understood that like these portals into our being, into our mind body, are actually gateways for all of these programs to attach into and to manipulate our reality. So with the false ascension matrix, there are negative, I don't want to use these dualistic terms because so many people are very turned off by dualism, but there is benevolent forces and there are very malevolent forces within our planet. And this is why we've had such a big problem throughout all of history, throughout all of the earth, with so many wars and so much violence, is because of these malevolent forces taking control of humans through these programs. And these programs are just very, very intelligently repackaged within the New Age spirituality paradigm. So, what we're actually doing throughout all these New Age spiritual practices that make us feel really, really good, because, of course, these energies can make us feel fantastic and we can believe that we are connected to Source, that we are on top of the world, that things are going great, when really they're pulling us further and further into the control. And this is how all of these New Age teachers, so a lot of the teachers, especially from the East, even in the West, we hear about these spiritual teachers committing these outrageous crimes against humanity. So much sexual misconduct and really, really awful things happening behind the scenes of their spiritual circles. So, how is this all happening? Through the false ascension matrix, which basically gives the individual power, gives them the opportunity to feel something they've never felt before, to feel a sense of connection, expansion, consciousness. But at the same time, they are being used as vessels for these malevolent forces, and this shows up as the ego. So, what is the ego other than Satan, right? So, ego is separating, ego separates us, ego really puts us in this worldview that maybe we're better than others. And I remember throughout my asana practice, like, I would go to class and I would be like, oh my God, like I'm the best one here, and this like whole sense of separation. And of course, this may not be everyone's experience, but I think that these ancient practices were really wonderful for the time in which they were prevalent. They were really, really good for the ancient times in which they arose. And now they're being used to keep us trapped in ego, to keep us away from our truth, from the God presence that is within our heart space. And of course, they did help me to come closer to where I am today. But I really had to come out of these practices. I had to disidentify with them. I had to go through massive ego debts. And the deeper that I go through this ascension process, the more light that I am receiving, the more I'm able to see the deeper layers of the ego that have been built up through all of these practices of yoga, of Reiki. That's kind of like a whole nother story with the Reiki. But yeah, so I would just encourage everyone who's in these practices, in these really ancient practices, okay, because that's the key word here. They're ancient practices that have been revised to become New Age. And in that revision, they have been repackaged into programming that is actually part of the false ascension. It is not organic ascension. It does not have a foundation with God, and anything that is not within God's foundation is crumbling. So I would just really encourage you to look at how these practices might have blown up the ego, might have been the driving force for the ego to predominate and to dominate your entire experience. So look at what you're striving towards, look at what is behind all of your actions, and simply just notice. And of course, there's no need for shame or judgment. We want to hold ourselves through these very delicate transformations and through these very profound experiences of death. So that's a little bit about my experience and my take on New Age spirituality and the ego traps that come with it. Thank you so much. If you haven't followed my YouTube, then please do so. I would love to receive all of your support. Namaste.